Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome. My name is Adelina, and I make videos about living in my tiny house on wheels and living a more intentional life. So, I almost never get negative comments on my videos. Not because I'm particularly good at it, but because you guys are amazing. And most of the people that come to watch my videos have a fair understanding of what these things are and what they cost. I had a comment recently that made me think that I should address it. Originally, this person made a comment on my tiny house tour video, and they asked the question, well, how much did it cost? So I directed them to the video that I made a while ago, where I actually went over all of the costs to build the tiny house, what I had originally thought I would be spending, what I actually spent, and then also in the second half of that video, I talk about the costs of living here in my tiny house, sort of the costs to live in the tiny house. And then the reply was basically, that's ridiculously expensive, and you had a subscriber for 5 minutes, but now I'm unsubscribing, which is a shame. And I understand. It's confusing. I'm just going to discuss why tiny houses are more expensive than people expect them to be, what the perception is, what they started as, and what they basically have become, the need that they fill, because I think that this is really important. So the tiny house movement has been around for a while, but it actually started, well, I think the main sort of impetus behind this tiny house on wheels movement was to provide an option for people who wanted to own their own home, but who couldn't afford a conventional foundation built house with land attached and all of the expenses that came along with it. It also was very much tied to the minimalism movement and the sort of the urge to only own the bare essentials and pare down, your life and simplify things, and really this minimalist mindset, which I totally understand, and I think is still a big part of the tiny house movement. It's really important to remember that the original houses, the ones that even still we still see on the videos on YouTube and things like that, they were smaller homes. These were homes that were built often 8 feet, maybe 8.5 feet wide, 16, 18, rarely 20 feet long. They were self-built with help from friends and maybe some trades, but they were not professionally built. And they often used salvage materials, reclaimed materials, and didn't include many of the luxuries that we consider normal in conventional built houses, such as large kitchens, large bathrooms, high-end finishes. These were not commonly things that were found in. Also, many of those original tiny houses were intended to be off-grid, not in municipal settings where there were any building regulations that they had to take into consideration. The fact is that tiny houses can still be a very economical option. Keep in mind that conventionally built houses have also increased in cost over the last years, and that is primarily because the cost of materials has gone up substantially, and the cost of labor also continues to go up. So those things went up in all arenas, which meant that conventional built houses became more expensive and tiny houses became more expensive. And here's why I think people get so confused, is the fact that when people look at a conventional foundation built house, even a smaller one, they think that a tiny house should be a lot less expensive than that. But the majority of the spaces in a conventionally built house are inexpensive spaces. They are hallways, living rooms, bedrooms. All of those spaces, yes, they take lumber and labor to build, but they're not expensive spaces. The expensive spaces in your home are your kitchen and your bathrooms. Those are the areas that are the most expensive. And your tiny house still has those things. Yes, albeit they're smaller. Your kitchen might be smaller, though I have to say my kitchen is bigger than a lot of places I've lived in. And often the bathrooms are smaller, and you usually just have one bathroom in a tiny house, and you would most likely have more than one in a conventionally built house. However, you still have to run the plumbing, you still have to have the wiring done, you still need to get those things inspected, you have appliances, cabinets. So all of those things cost money. And so the tiny house, while being substantially less in square footage, still has the more expensive rooms in it and less of the inexpensive rooms. There's one hallway, a very small living room, and a bedroom. Also, if you're building a tiny house and you have any intention of parking it in a municipality, a town, a city, even on your own land, especially here in Canada, you're going to be dealing with regulations, land use regulations. And that means that you're going to need your house built by a professional, or you're going to need to get certified, because the builder will have to have some sort of certification which will prove that the home was built to some sort of building standards. In Canada, and I think in North America, the certifications that they look for are the CSA certification and the RVIA certification. And those are expensive for a builder to get. And they're certainly going to be expensive for you to get if you're self-building, because you're only building one house. A professional builder will invest the time and money into getting their certifications because they're building multiple houses, so therefore it's worth it for them. However, that means that that's going to add to the cost of your house. You're also going to be using professional trades, and the work they do needs to be inspected. All of those things add to the cost of your build. If you're working with a builder, then that builder needs to get paid too. They function as your general contractor, your project manager. They manage the trades. They arrange for the inspections to be done so that everything is done to code, and that adds to the cost of the build. So there's a lot of things that go into building a tiny house now that probably weren't factored into the tiny houses we originally saw when, certainly the houses that I originally saw when I started my tiny house journey and dreaming about building my own tiny house. I would see all these cute little houses that were built by the owners and their families. And some of those people were tradespeople, but they still weren't having to be certified. The homes were different then. Now, because so many more people want to live in these tiny houses, and they want to live in them on grid, and they want to live in them in a town or a city. So as a recap, in case you haven't watched the video where I discuss the cost of my tiny house, I'm going to tell you what it cost. The trailer itself, well, I'll start with the size of my tiny house. My tiny house is 37 feet long from the very back here to the front of the gooseneck. I have a gooseneck trailer. My home is 9.5 feet wide and 13.5 feet high from street level to the highest point of the tiny house. So the trailer is custom built gooseneck trailers. Gooseneck trailers are more expensive. Custom built trailers are more expensive. Because it's 9.5 feet wide, it was more expensive. But you want a trailer that can handle the weight of your tiny house, and you want a trailer that can handle the stress that it's going to be under as you're pulling your tiny house down the road to move it, whether you move it all the time or you're only going to move it a few times in its lifetime, like mine will be. So my trailer cost me, I'm just going to read here, $20,622. And was it worth it? Absolutely. Because your foundation, whether it's in a conventional house or a tiny house, as I've said before, is the most important piece of your build. If you don't invest in that and make sure you've made the right decision, everything else could and very well may go sideways. The cost of my house will include all my appliances, my fridge, stove, my washer dryer combo unit. It's going to include all of the fixtures, the lighting, all of that. It's also going to include my custom built cabinetry. Now, this is my only house and it's my forever house. So I wanted to be sure that I had all of the things that I wanted in it. And I wanted a big kitchen, and I wanted an office space, and I wanted a lot of storage space in this home. So all of the cabinets in Serendipity are custom built cabinets. I have a lot of windows in this tiny house. I always forget how many windows I have. I have 12 windows total in this tiny house, including the ones in my loft. And of that, all 9 open. So that's more expensive. All of those things add to the price of the tiny house. The cost of the tiny house in total, including my trailer, that is just over $20,000, $147,875. Please keep in mind, the majority of my viewers are thinking about the cost in US dollars. And the houses that you see on YouTube videos and on HGTV shows, they're quoting US dollars. So if I was to do the conversion based on the exchange rate right now, that is just over 117,000 US. Is it more than these tiny houses that you see where people say, yeah, I built my house for $50,000 or, $70,000? Yeah. But if you go back and look at those houses, they're either quite a bit smaller than mine and usually built by, not built by professional builders, self-built, and they use reclaimed materials and recycled materials. A professional builder is not allowed to use reclaimed and recycled materials because the house needs to pass inspection. It needs to be built to code, fire rating, and all of those things. Therefore, you can't be using reclaimed windows and doors and things like that. Also, the houses that you're seeing on those videos, the ones that are self-built, the prices that they're telling you, if they say they built it for $70,000, they are not factoring in labor. So they're not adding up what their time spent is in building their own tiny house. They're not factoring in what it would have cost to have a professional plumber, a professional electrician do the work in their tiny house. They're not factoring in what the cost of new materials would have been for new windows and doors and cabinets. And they're not factoring in inspections or being certified in order to pass building code and be able to then be legally parked in so many places around the world right now. If you were to factor those in, I would argue that they wouldn't be a whole lot different than the cost of my tiny house if you were building the same size. The fact is, this is my forever home. I didn't set out to build the cheapest house I could. Unfortunately, I have no skills, so I couldn't contribute to the build of it. And my priority was to give myself as many options for parking my tiny house down the road. So I wanted to be able to park in a town or a municipality or even on my own land someday, where I could build some other tiny houses as bunkies and Airbnb rentals. So I would love to know your comments down below, what you think of the cost of tiny houses nowadays. Please subscribe. I still notice that the majority of my viewers are not subscribers. And here's why it's important, and here's why I keep asking you to subscribe. If you subscribe, it lets YouTube know that the content is of value, and therefore they recommend it to more people when people are searching for answers about tiny houses and tiny house living. Also because I want you part of the family, so if you subscribe, you can be part of this great community. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will see you on Wednesday for a recipe video.